In the late summer of 1914, the agrarian plains of the Lublin voivodeship were heavily cultivated and bracing for the autumn harvest. At the time, the city of Lublin was at its demographic and spatial peak. In less than half a century, its population had grown nearly fourfold to 80,000 residents, supported by expanding regional trade. In August, that growth abruptly halted. Inflexible mobilization schedules forced the Austro-Hungarian military into a rapid, preemptive strike against Russian forces, turning Congress Poland into a primary theater of conflict. The opening maneuvers were executed with 19th-century pageantry. Cavalry patrols from both empires rode out in immaculate uniforms, expecting brief, disciplined engagements. Those illusions dissolved under concentrated artillery bombardment. The combat quickly escalated into what was locally termed hurricane fire, an industrial scale of violence that leveled historic town squares and shattered the physical landscape. The Eastern Front in 1914 was defined by extreme spatial mobility. Rather than fighting from static, deep concrete networks, massive armies clashed over exposed terrain and hastily constructed earthen ramparts. This table, the Lublin Duality, illustrates how this rapid collision forged a specific anatomy of occupation. The region was split into two completely separate realities: the logistical demands of the military machine on one side and the struggle for civilian survival on the other. On this force posture diagram, military mobility becomes clear. Massive block arrows indicate the Russian 4th and 5th Armies executing sweeping marches against Austro-Hungarian units. These maneuvers culminated in meeting engagements at Kraśnik-Komarów, where hundreds of thousands collided. For the local populace, the military's strategic mobility meant an immediate loss of agency. The rapid shifting of the front lines resulted in heavily restricted movement and forced evacuations. Survival largely depended on class. Diaries from the period reveal that wealthy landowning families possessed the financial liquidity and connections to abandon their estates entirely, fleeing east to cities like Kyiv. The peasantry remained trapped, bound to the land without resources. They were subjected to martial law decrees and forcibly marched out of combat zones. The sheer speed of the imperial advance weaponized human movement, turning the surrounding geography into a prison for anyone who could not afford to escape. The armies sweeping through the region carried insatiable logistical demands. During the opening months of the Galician campaigns, the Austro-Hungarian 4th Army alone suffered over 700,000 casualties. To offset these immense losses, the military administration adopted highly aggressive extraction policies, treating the occupied territory as a vast supply depot. Systematic requisitions stripped the region bare. Metal plating was torn from cathedral roofs, grain silos emptied, and livestock seized to feed the front lines. Under this pressure, the civilian economy collapsed. Basic metallic currency completely vanished. Local shops shuttered. Civilians relied on illicit black markets. Conscription created massive labor voids, leaving crops to rot in the fields. The military apparatus sustained its operations by deliberately shifting the cost of the war onto the local populace, subsidizing its logistics with civilian ruin. By late autumn, torrential rains transformed the environment itself into a tactical trap. The regional loess clay dissolved into a knee-deep mire. This mud bogged down heavy supply wagons and caused transport horses to founder. The landscape's friction quickly eroded High Command's illusions of a rapid victory. As freezing temperatures set in, conditions in the shallow, hastily dug earthen fortifications worsened, leading to rampant trench rot and infectious disease among the troops. This slide displays the physical consequences of the Russian army's scorched earth retreat, overlaying strict martial law decrees on photographs of residential buildings reduced to ash. Senior military physicians documented a struggle for basic biological survival. In ruined, chimneyless farmhouses, soldiers and civilians lay completely flat on freezing dirt floors, just to breathe beneath the thick wood smoke. The hostile environment stripped away the remnants of imperial grandeur, forcing both occupier and occupied into a shared, primal struggle against the elements. The 1914 campaign left permanent scars. The rapid demographic growth of pre-war Lublin was replaced by a long-term urban stagnation, set against a landscape cratered by artillery and scattered with mass graves. Municipal institutions, once relied upon for civil order, were completely erased and subsumed by the occupying military government. Without local governance, minority communities were targeted and physically isolated, permanently severing commercial networks that had sustained the region for decades. The resulting impoverishment was too vast for the ruined local administration to manage. Survival required the intervention of external philanthropic bodies. International organizations like the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee stepped into this void, establishing some of the first transnational humanitarian aid networks on the Eastern Front. The 1914 Eastern Front Campaign established the brutal blueprint for 20th century total war, demonstrating that as state institutions fail under military pressure, survival requires modern transnational lifelines.